Back by popular demand, it's the return of the grump. The Cold War lasted from the end of the Second World War until President Gorbachev resigned on Christmas Day 1991. President Yeltsin toasted in a new era, repeatedly, and called it a day in 2000. All over the world, new alliances were formed, and we all breathed a collective sigh of relief, perhaps some more than others. Nuclear arsenals were being supposedly reduced, and traditional adversaries were becoming friends. Mankind had made it through the greatest challenge of its existence, and had managed to emerge stronger and all the better for it. What now could possibly go wrong? Fast forward just 2 decades, and the human race seems truly on the brink of self-annihilation. How could so much have gone wrong so quickly, without there having been a major military global entanglement? Harbingers of doom have been warning about Armageddon for at least 2,000 years. But over the last 20, they have been ratcheting up their rhetoric. We are all going to die horribly from the effects of new cold wars, they say. From climate change, pandemics, pollution, overpopulation, and most absurdly, gluttony or starvation, depending on where you live. There seems to be no single country responsible. Rather, it seems that mankind has collectively decided to follow the examples of lemmings and is now racing to hurl itself over the cliff. Some blame weak and ineffective leadership, which to a large extent is true. Others point the finger at capitalism and big business, and this truth is also inescapable. Social media and religion rightly come in for their share of censure. And then blame should be assigned liberally among aspiring small states seeking nuclear recognition, brown, black and white terrorist organizations, drug cartels and other criminal enterprises, and so the list goes on, each playing its part. The world is teetering on the brink of oblivion, and as always, the rich become richer and the poor become poorer. Last month, apparently, a worldwide telephone survey was conducted by the UN. The only question asked was, would you please give your honest opinion about possible solutions to the food shortage in the rest of the world? Sadly, the survey was a complete failure because in Eastern Europe they didn't know what honest meant. In Western Europe they didn't know what shortage meant. In Africa they didn't know what food meant, and in the Middle East they didn't know what solution meant. In China they didn't know what opinion meant. In South America, they didn't know what please meant, and in the United States, they didn't know what the rest of the world meant. And in Australia, New Zealand, Canada and Great Britain, everyone hung up as soon as they heard the Indian accent. Recognition of the efficacy of the various vaccinations is being ludicrously and irresponsibly politicized. For example, an Italian travelling from France with an AstraZeneca certificate can go to England and go about his or her business. An AstraZeneca vaccination certificate for an Englishman travelling from, say, Pakistan is not, however, recognised in the United Kingdom, and thus a stay in an assigned hotel for 10 days quarantine plus 3 COVID tests at the person's expense is necessitated. Yet neither of them will be allowed in at all if their vaccinations hailed from Russia or from China. Some countries require proof of a negative test 48 hours before travel, while others demand 72 hours ahead. But then everyone is crammed into a plane to get there anyway. It's simply beyond comprehension. And why, oh why, are so many people determined not to be vaccinated, while equally so many people want a vaccination but there are none available? It's my right to say no, some say. I'm free to do what I like. Freedom of choice, my arse. Nobody has the right to prolong and foster a situation that has such a devastating impact on others. While this nonsense is allowed to continue, the happy virus rubs its hands with glee and mutates. Only a fully vaccinated populace ends the problem. Anyone who refuses to go along with this should be totally ostracized, and I'm being polite here. This brings me on to freedom of speech and expression. The spoilt populations of much of the Western world assume that it is their right to say and do and publish what they like, regardless of consequence, consideration of feelings, implications, and so forth. Take the French handling of the insensitive and deeply offensive Charlie Hebdo cartoons concerning the Prophet Muhammad. Essentially, the government did nothing about it, writing it off as satire, but then rued the consequences. Yet when President Macron was depicted as Hitler in a poster, the instigator was prosecuted. Past French President Jacques Chirac had previously condemned the publication and warned against such obvious provocations. Anything that can hurt the convictions of someone else, in particular religious convictions, should be avoided, he said. Freedom of expression should be exercised in a spirit of responsibility. Apparently, no one was listening. The fact remains, we are all perfectly used to losing certain liberties, most usually for the common good, and while some believe that the quality of their lives is diminished because of them, that's just tough, because it's for the protection of all. And what of the so-called bastion of freedom, the United States of America, dishing out sanctions, rules, and orders? Forgive me, but this country is so off track that I genuinely believe its demise as a global leader is now inevitable. Its role as the world's policeman is over. Ask any Afghan. Their intervention in so many countries, either militarily or through sanctions, has caused untold and irredeemable misery across the world. Look at Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Vietnam, Korea, Panama, Cuba. The list is seemingly endless. And it's not just me saying this. The world community has had a bellyful of the nation. Just look at what the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs had to say the other day. And while their foreign policies may not be perfect, I reckon that Ms. Hua Chunying makes a good point here. This is the country, with the UK not far behind it, where it's considered okay to fire a $70,000 missile from a $28 million drone, flying at a cost of $3,624 per hour, to kill people in the Middle East living on less than $1 a day. This is the country where there's remarkably little discussion about how much it will cost to bomb people, but when it comes to assisting people who are suffering, either at home or abroad, suddenly everybody is asking if it's affordable. Let me end this rant with some words of wisdom offered by the leader of perhaps the most progressive Arab nation when he was asked about the future of his country. He answered, "My grandfather rode a camel. My father rode a camel. But I ride a Mercedes. My son rides a Land Rover, and my grandson is going to ride a Land Rover. But my great-grandson is going to have to ride a camel again." When asked why, he replied, "Hard times create strong men. Strong men create easy times. Easy times create weak men, and weak men create difficult times. Many will not understand it, but you have to raise warriors, not parasites." Add to that the historical reality that all great empires, the Persians, the Trojans, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans, and in later years the British and now America, all rose and all but perished within 250 to 300 years. They were not conquered by external enemies. They rotted from within. America has now passed that 250-year mark, and the rot is starting to be visible and is accelerating. We are past the Mercedes and the Land Rover years. The camels are on the horizon. That's all for now. Next time I'll grump about some particularly nasty environmental issues and castigate some more deserving politicians. Keep safe and well in the meantime, and all the very best.